For 1,000 years, the large grave mound at Nordfjordeid in western Norway hid its secret, one of the largest ship burials from the Viking Age. A chieftain was buried in his fully equipped ship on his last journey to Valhalla. The Viking ship is the foremost symbol of the Viking Age, the 200 years of our prehistory that have formed and defined Norwegian national identity. The very first find of a Viking ship was at Borge in the county of Vestfold in 1852. Even though this ship was in a dismal condition, it proved that the large Viking ships mentioned in the sagas existed in reality. In 1867, the tuna shipper was found at Rolfsøy in the county of Østfold. As with the find from Borge, only the lower parts of the ship were preserved. The find of the Gokstad Ship in 1880 was a sensation because of the good preservation quality of the soil. For the first time, one had a complete, fully equipped Viking ship. More than 20 years later, the most spectacular of all ship burials saw the light of day at Slagentongen, close to Tønsberg. This ship was found in 1904 and called Oseberg after the discovery site. But as early as in 1874, another large Viking ship burial had been unearthed on the farm Myklebust at Nordfjordeid. This burial differs from the other ship burials in the way that the ship was burnt. Because the Myklebust ship was not as well preserved as Gokstad and Oseberg, this ship has been completely overshadowed. This film brings a new focus on this great find. After a new survey, interpretation and analysis of the archaeological material, this find has been reconstructed. In this way, we hope to find out more about the secrets hidden in this burial. How large was this ship? Is it possible to find out who was buried here? What do we really know about the spectacular ship burial custom in the Viking Age? What kind of a society was it that buried their leaders in this way more than 1,000 years ago? In 1874, farmer Johannes Myklebust of Nordfjordeid began digging in a large burial mound on his farm. He contacted the museum in Bergen, and the archaeologist Anders Lund Loranja went to examine the mound. This was the 26-year-old Loranja's first archaeological examination in western Norway. The enormous grave mound contained traces of a magnificent ship burial from the Viking Age. Mr. Loranja was fully aware of the importance of this find. He wrote, "The main interest of such a great find does not lie in the simple artifacts, nor in the quantity of these artifacts, but especially in the pronounced funeral custom in the whole find. This lets us discover and trace the thoughts and motives behind the funeral ceremonies used. In them, we can see not only a reflection of the accepted predominant conceptions about death and the journey to Valhalla in the Viking Age, but also an image and view of their life and the entirety of their religious understanding. The find that Mr. Lurania collected lies today at Bergen Museum. Unfortunately, a complete field report with pictures and drawings is missing, and only half of the burial mound was excavated. There is, however, a shorter written description of the excavation. In light of this, we have reconstructed the structure of the mound. The mound was built on the shore and was 30 meters in diameter and 4 meters high. Around the boundary there was a 4 meters broad and 1 meter deep ditch. In the bottom there were 2 separate charcoal layers and artifacts. The charcoal layer of the ship stretched out to the edges of the mound and was thickest in the middle. The enormous quantity of charcoal tells us that the ship's size must have been considerable. The finds of a mast ring and metal furnishings prove that the ship had rigging and a sail. Knowledge from Oseberg and Gokstad helps deduce something about the construction of the Myklebust ship, even though it is burnt. The large dimensions of the split rivets and nails used in the ship reveal that this was a ship of considerable size. The split rivets have different sizes, depending on where they were used in the ship. Those in the boards along the sides of the ship are unusually long, with a length of 5 to 8 centimeters. This indicates a depth of the boards up to 3 to 4 centimeters. This is larger than corresponding ones in Gokstad and Oseberg. The Myklebust ship was probably built with pine, which requires thicker boards than ships built in oak. It is, however, quite clear that this ship has been at least as large as the other 2 ships. The ship at Myklebust was most likely of the Oseberg type. The number of shields in the find may also tell us much about the size of the ship. Shields are part of the weaponry in men's graves. In ship graves with many shields, these are believed to represent the crew. At the funeral, the shields were probably fastened to the rail on each side of the ship. In the 23 meters long Gokstad ship, 35 shields were found. This is in accordance with the 32 thwarts for the rowers. In the burnt, and therefore far worse preserved Viking Burial, 44 shields were found. The mound was moreover not completely excavated. If these 44 shields represent the number of thwarts, the Myklebust ship must have had a larger crew than Gokstad and Oseberg. The impressive artifacts in this grave show that an important person was buried here. After the ship with the dead body was burnt, the dead man's bones were collected and buried in the center of the mound. His bones and clothing lay in a large decorated Celtic vessel, covered by 12 shield bosses. Over the shield bosses, his weaponry lay: sword, spear, axes, arrows, and a bow, together with a knife and the bridle of one of the horses that followed its master to the grave. The Celtic bronze vessel is one of the very finest examples we know of as regards Irish enamel art from this period. The male figures resemble the furnishings from one of the buckets in the Oseberg find. The analysis of the human bones shows that these are remains of a well-built man, aged 30 to 35. Traces on the skeleton may indicate that the man did not die peacefully. There is a possible cut or shot injury in the shoulder. A single arrowhead was also found with the burnt bones in the vessel. It was perhaps still in his body when the man was burnt. Large quantities of burnt animal bones were also found in the charcoal layers of the mound. These burnt bones can probably be ascribed to domestic animals. Unfortunately, these bones were not collected, but Mr. Lorenia describes finds of bones from one or more horses. Society was changing. Old, time-honored customs and power structures were under pressure. In times of unrest, it was crucial to maintain ties to old gods and forefathers. The preservation of tradition, religion, and rituals was more important than before, and this can explain the rich pagan ship burial custom. Religion was closely connected to the old social order, and ship burial is central in Norse mythology. In older Edda saga, it is told about the god Balder's death. The Old Norse gods took Balder's corpse and carried it to the shore for cremation. They then laid Balder's corpse on a shield and carried him out to the ship. When Balder's wife saw this, her heart burst from grief, and they laid her corpse next to her husband and lit the fire. Balder's horse was also in the fire. This custom is also described in the sagas of the kings. In the Ynglinga saga, it is told about the Swedish king Hake. He was mortally wounded in battle and had a warship loaded with dead men and weapons, set on fire, and sent out on the open sea. In addition to saga literature, there is, however, a contemporary, trustworthy, and detailed eyewitness description of a Viking chieftain's ship burial. This Arabian description gives us unique insight into a dramatic, fascinating burial ritual. The closest parallel to the burial it describes is precisely the grave at Nordfjordeid. Ibn Fadlan was an Arabian magistrate at the Caliph in Baghdad. During the years AD 921 to 922, he journeyed north to the king of the Volga Bulgarians in the neighborhood of modern-day Samara in Russia. Some Vikings engaged in trade had pitched their camp on the shores of the Volga. One of their chieftains had recently died, and Ibn Fadlan therefore had the opportunity to experience and describe for the future how the Vikings carried out a burnt ship burial. Ibn Fadlan's written record gives us unique insight to the very special burnt ship burial ritual, and the similarity to the Myklebust grave is striking. Who was he? The man buried in his ship at Nordfjordeid. To judge from the grave objects and the size of the ship, he was certainly a man of the absolutely highest stratum of society, a chieftain or king. The analysis of his bones tells us that the dead one was a well-built man, aged 30 to 35. Traces of a possible injury in his shoulder and the find of an arrowhead among the burnt bones indicate that he underwent a violent death. A probable conclusion is therefore that he was killed in a fight. The contents of the grave tell us that it was built during the last half of the 9th century. Animal bones in the vessel indicate that the burial took place in the spring or early summer. In Harald Fairhair's saga, it is told that the king of Nordfjord at that time was Outbjörn. This king is said to have been killed in the national union struggle in an important battle against Harald Fairhair on the coast of Møre. Together with other local chieftains, King Outbjörn went northwards with a large army to fight Harald Fairhair. The armies met by the island of Sulskjell in Nordmøre in a sea battle. Harald Fairhair won, and King Outbjörn was among the dead. The battle at Sulskjell is supposed to have been in AD 876, and this is in accordance with the building of the Myklebust grave. The evidence suggests that the dead man in the ship grave at Nordfjordeid most probably is King Audbjorn of Fjordane. If it is King Audbjorn who is buried in the Myklebust mound, we can imagine this course of events in the spring or early summer of 876. After the battle, the corpse of the mightiest man in Nordfjord at that time was carried home to his family farm at Nordfjordeid. Dressed in his finest clothes, he was laid to rest in his large ship, which was set ashore. The mighty ship was decorated with shields along the rail, and the sail hoisted for his last journey. On his journey to Valhalla, the dead man had with him all his belongings. The chieftain's weaponry was ceremonially destroyed after local practice. Perhaps this was done to render harmless the magic powers that was ascribed to the weapons. During the burial, animals were sacrificed. Probably the chieftain's horses, some farm animals, and his dogs were cut to death and laid inside the ship. If he also had one of his slaves with him on his journey to Valhalla, as Ibn Fadlan mentions, we do not know. When all the rituals necessary to secure the king a safe and honorable transition to Valhalla were carried out, the ship was set on fire. With the fire, the king was carried to his forefathers and the everlasting feast in Valhalla. When the ship was thoroughly burnt, his relatives collected the king's burnt bones and put these in his rare bronze vessel. The vessel was covered with 12 shield bosses. These shields represented perhaps his closest circle of warriors. The bronze vessel and the rest of his property were then buried on the very spot where his corpse had been burnt. All of it was covered with a layer of sand, and then a new layer of charcoal from the ship, before, at last, the monumental mound over the grave was built. In this way, the grave lay sealed and intact through centuries, while the memory of who was buried here gradually faded. Nearly 1,000 years were to pass before the treasures of the mound were to see daylight again, when Johannes Myklebust and Anders Loranje reopened it in 1874.